Hi, both. Thanks for joining us today on our Business Gurus channel, where we will be discussing key business topics to help students grasp the most important elements of their course in preparation for their exams and future career. Let's get started.
Welcome to your deep dive. Today we are really zeroing in, focusing on a foundational concept in finance.
Hmm.
The one that basically decides if a business makes it or not, total costs.
Exactly. Total costs.
Our source material today, it's pretty concise, really gets to the mathematical heart of cost accounting.
Mhm.
And our mission, well, it isn't just memorizing some definition. It's about understanding the strategic power that's kind of hidden in one simple equation. We're basically giving you a shortcut to understanding the financial bones beneath, well, pretty much every business model you'll ever see.
hmm Total costs, often just called TC. It's really the starting line for financial literacy. It captures all the money going out, the outflows that are, necessary just for the organization to exist and do its thing. If you really get a handle on this structure, you immediately see things clear. Pricing, risk, scaling.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Let's start right at the beginning, the definition. What did the sources say total costs are exactly?
Okay. The sources define total costs, or TC, as the sum of all costs a business incurs. And this is the important bit.
Right.
In order to operate.
Right, in order to operate.
Yes, that phrase is crucial. It separates, the essential spending from maybe just random expenses. These are the costs that have to be paid for the business to function, period.
Okay, so that's the big number, the total sum.
Yeah.
But you mentioned structure, and the sources seem to emphasize that too, that the real insight comes from how that total gets divided up.
Precisely. The sources jump right into the core framework, the formula. It splits costs into two really essential types.
Ah, the formula. Let's hear it.
This is really the heart of cost accounting. It's
Yeah.
total costs, TC, total fixed costs, TFC, plus total variable costs, TVC. That's it. That's the structure you need to visualize how any company spends money. It forces you right away to sort every dollar based on how it behaves when production levels change.
Okay, let's tackle that first part then. Total fixed costs, TFC. Most people probably think of rent rate, something that just stays the same every month.
Rent is the classic example, yes. Very clean.
TFC represents the cost of just being ready to produce, maybe.
Yeah.
Like keeping the lights on, having the factory space.
Exactly. It's the cost of stability, the cost to maintain the capacity to produce. It doesn't matter if you make nothing or 1,000 units, those costs are there.
So rent, insurance, maybe.
Insurance, yeah.
Ah,
Depreciation on equipment is often in there too. These costs are generally tied to time, not volume.
but, and this seems important, PFC isn't always fixed, is it? That's where maybe the simple definition gets a bit more complex in reality.
You're right. That's a really crucial distinction. The sources mention, or at least imply, this idea of a relevant range.
Relevant range of operation. Okay, what does that mean?
Well, what's fascinating here is the word fixed can be a bit misleading. It doesn't mean it's fixed forever, no matter what. The relevant range is like the normal zone the business expects to operate in. So if your factory can comfortably make up to, say, 10,000 widgets a month, the rent for that factory is fixed within that 0 to 10,000 range.
Mhm.
But if demand explodes and you suddenly need to make 20,000 widgets,
You need another factory. Or a bigger one.
exactly, you might need to rent a second factory. So your total fixed costs jump up. They take a step up to a new, higher fixed level.
So it's fixed, but in steps.
Yeah,
Not like a smooth line upwards.
correct. Fixed within a certain range, then it jumps if you exceed that range.
Got it. So managing TFC is really about planning your capacity, but also being smart within the limits you currently have.
That's a good way to put it. Now, let's contrast that sort of step-like TFC, with the other piece of the puzzle, total variable costs, or TVC.
Okay, variable. So these do change with output.
Directly. These are the costs that move pretty much in direct proportion to your output. They're tied to volume, unlike fixed costs, which are tied more to time.
Okay, so give me an example. If I run like a bakery,
Flour, sugar, eggs.
Yeah.
The ingredients for each cake you bake.
right? The more cakes I bake, the more flour I buy.
Exactly. Packaging to the box for each cake. And maybe direct labor if you pay someone per cake they decorate.
So if I sell twice as many cakes, my TVC roughly doubles. It's that linear relationship.
That's the idea. Raw materials, packaging, sometimes specific types of labor like piece rate work. These are the costs that, management can often adjust pretty quickly. Just make more or make less, turn the dial.
But hang on, what about labor more generally? If you're talking to someone familiar with business, they know it's not always that simple. Like what about salaried managers in the factory? Or if you have union contracts? Those payroll costs feel pretty fixed. even though they're related to production.
Ah, good point. And that brings up an important question about operational flexibility, doesn't it? That factory manager's salary. It's typically fixed. It doesn't change whether the production line makes 500 units or 5,000. So, TFC.
Okay.
But maybe an hourly worker's wage, if the company can easily adjust hours or staffing levels based on demand. Well, that behaves more like a TVC.
So you really have to look at the behavior of the cost, not just its label.
Precisely. This need to categorize costs accurately based on how they behave is why this TC equals TFC plus TVC formula is so critical for planning. It forces that analysis.
Okay, so we've got the pure forms, fixed and variable, but I suspect reality is messier. The source material seems to hint at that. What about costs that aren't, neatly one or the other?
Absolutely. You've hit on a key point for anyone doing actual cost analysis. We have to talk about mixed costs.
Mixed costs, or sometimes called semi-variable.
Same thing. Yeah, semi-variable costs. These have like a base fixed component and a variable component all bundled together.
Okay, example.
Think about your factory's electricity bill.
Right.
You probably pay a basic connection fee each month just to be hooked up to the grid. That part's fixed.
Doesn't matter if I use power or not.
Right. But then the actual amount of electricity you use, that depends entirely on how many machines are running, how long they run. That part is variable.
Okay, so one bill, two cost behaviors inside it. Fixed base plus variable usage.
Exactly. Another common one is sales compensation.
Oh, yeah. How so?
A salesperson might get a fixed base salary that's TFC,
Okay.
but they also get a commission, maybe a percentage of the sales they make. That part is directly tied to volume, so it's TVC.
So to figure out your true total cost, you actually have to kind of surgically separate that mixed cost back into its fixed and variable pieces.
You absolutely do. If you want accurate forecasts, you have to do that separation. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, understanding and separating these types, fixed, variable, and yes, mixed is the only way you can reliably predict your profit at different sales levels. You can't just look at the total dollars spent last month. You need to know how the spending behaves, how it moves.
Which brings us to the strategic side. We've defined TC, TFC, TVC. We know about mixed costs. So why does the mix between fixed and variable costs matter so much? Why care about the ratio, not just the total?
Because that ratio, that mix, dictates the company's financial risk profile. It determines something called operating leverage.
Operating leverage, okay.
Think about a company with really high total fixed costs, but relatively low total variable costs, like a major airline.
Okay, yeah. Massive investments in planes, airport gates, maintenance contracts, lots of fixed costs.
Huge TFC. The variable cost per passenger might be relatively small, maybe just fuel, snacks, some booking fees.
Right.
That airline has high operating leverage.
And high operating leverage means high risk, but also high potential reward. Is that right?
Exactly it. If that airline flies its planes full, wow, almost every extra ticket sold after covering those huge fixed costs is nearly pure profit. The margins on those last seats are enormous.
But the flip side.
The flip side is brutal. If they fly half empty, those massive fixed costs don't go away.
Yeah.
Rent on the gate is still due. The plane payment is still due. They start losing money very, very quickly.
Okay, so high TFC means big swings in profitability based on volume. What's the opposite? Low operating leverage.
Right. Contrast that airline with maybe a modern software company, a SaaS business. Maybe they rely heavily on cloud infrastructure.
Okay, cloud hosting. Is that TFC or TVC? It feels kind of fixed, like a subscription.
That's a great modern example, and it can be tricky. Often, cloud hosting behaves like a variable cost.
How so?
Because most cloud providers charge based on usage, data transfer, processing power, storage used.
So if your user base grows, your cloud bill goes up. If it shrinks.
Your bill shrinks too, often quite proportionally. So, in many cases, it acts more like TVC than TFC.
Interesting. So that software company might have lower fixed costs overall.
Potentially, yes. Less need for massive physical infrastructure up front. Their cost structure gives them low operating leverage.
Meaning less risk if there's a downturn.
Exactly. Their risk of catastrophic losses is lower because their costs can shrink down along with their revenue. It's more flexible.
But the upside isn't as explosive either.
Correct. Their profit margins don't typically expand quite as dramatically as that high TFC airline when sales boom. Less leverage cuts both ways.
So this structure, this TFC versus TVC split, this is really why you, the listener, should care. The core insight seems to be that this mix determines the company's, its financial elasticity, how much it can stretch or shrink.
Elasticity, risk profile, scalability. Yes, it tells you if a company can ramp up production quickly without huge new investments, and crucially, if it can survive a sudden drop in sales.
And this all connects back to the other key terms mentioned in the sources: sales revenue, profits, losses.
They're all linked. It's simple on the surface. Sales revenue minus total costs equals profit or loss.
But managing that outcome isn't just about boosting revenue or cutting any cost.
No, it requires managing the components of total costs, understanding that TFC-TVC structure.
So for instance, if management needs to cut costs fast, like right now,
They're almost always going to look at total variable costs first
why?
because they're usually the easiest and fastest to change. You can order fewer raw materials starting tomorrow. You might be able to reduce temporary labor hours quickly.
It's dialing down the activity.
Right. You can adjust TVC without, breaking leases or selling off essential machinery, things tied to TFC, which are much harder and slower to change.
So knowing your cost components is essential for effective cost control, for planning, for adapting. It lets you move from just looking backward at what did we spend to looking forward.
To how will our spending, and therefore our profit, change if our production level goes up or down by 10%? It allows for scenario planning.
Okay, so let's recap. We started with the fundamental building block, total costs, the sum of everything spent to operate. We broke it down using the core formula. TC equals TFC plus TVC. Total cost equals total fixed costs plus total variable costs.
We added the real-world wrinkles, like the relevant range for fixed costs and the existence of mixed costs that need separating.
And we saw how the ratio between TFC and TVC creates operating leverage, dictating a company's risk, its flexibility, and its potential for profit swings.
That separation into fixed and variable gives you the strategic map. It lets you anticipate financial futures, not just record the past. But let's leave you with a final thought on this, something to chew on.
Okay.
We talked about how TVC is generally easier to cut quickly. But what happens if a business makes a strategic decision to reduce its total fixed costs? Say they outsource a big internal department like IT or logistics to a third party.
Okay, so their TFC goes down, which sounds good.
It might reduce immediate total costs, yes. But how does that outsourcing decision, turning a fixed cost potentially into a variable one paid to the vendor, change the company's operating leverage and its risk profile in the long run?
So you might have lowered your fixed commitment, but maybe you now have a higher variable cost per transaction or less direct control.
Exactly. Did you trade predictable stability, even if it was a high cost, for immediate flexibility that might actually cost more per unit down the line, or reduce your control over a key function?
It forces you to think about that trade-off.
Hmm.
Control versus flexibility, fixed versus variable. It's not always about just lowering the total number today.
It raises that critical question. How much stability are you willing to give up for that flexibility? Or vice versa. There's no single right answer. It depends on the strategy.
Something to definitely think about. Next time you look at any company, think about that structure. What does their fixed versus variable cost mix tell you about how they're built to handle the future? That's your challenge until our next deep dive.
Thanks to both of you for joining us today. You've been listening to the Business Gurus. Let's now hand it over to you. What further questions do you have based on what we've discussed so far? Leave a comment and we'll get back to you right away. If you haven't already, hit that follow for more business tips.